We needed it. A break, a reset, a pause from the chaotic undertow of modern life that had pulled us apart, strand by subtle strand. That's what I kept telling myself as I booked the beachfront resort in Tulum. 5 nights, all-inclusive, turquoise waters, and warm sand. The brochure read like a promise we both silently hoped would be kept. Emma and I had been married for 8 years. 8 years of Sunday grocery runs, Netflix marathons, mortgage payments, and the quiet erosion of desire that creeps in unnoticed. I loved her, still do in some strange, muscle memory kind of way. But lately, love felt like something we performed rather than felt. We went through the motions, polite, friendly, sex on anniversaries and birthdays, maybe once in between if the mood struck right, which it hadn't for months. She used to smile like the sun lived in her teeth. Now, she smiled like it was an obligation, something she gave the world to keep it from asking too many questions. We arrived on a Monday afternoon. The heat hit us like a welcome slap as we stepped off the shuttle. Emma wore a wide-brimmed straw hat and her favorite linen sundress, her long auburn hair curling slightly in the humid air. She looked beautiful, not in a way I'd forgotten, but in a way I'd overlooked. Maybe we had a chance to fix this, I thought. The hotel was impressive, sleek and modern, yet somehow still infused with that rustic charm you'd expect from a Mexican resort hugging the shoreline. White stone archways, palm trees swaying lazily in the breeze, and the faint sound of a steel drum band playing somewhere near the bar. A tall man in a white button-down shirt and navy slacks met us at the entrance. "Welcome to El Encanto del Mar," he said with a warm, practiced smile. His name tag read Miguel. His accent was light, his English perfect. "Let me take you to the front desk. You must be Mr. and Mrs. Talbot." I looked over at Emma, who was already smiling back at him. Not just politely, warmly, almost intimately. I brushed it off. We were tired. People smile more when they're trying to signal peace, I told myself. Miguel didn't walk us to the front desk. He led us past it. "We have you in one of our signature villas," he said, glancing at Emma. "Very private. Very special." I carried the bags while Miguel rolled out the charm. He pointed out the oceanfront dining areas, the spa, the adults-only pool with the swim-up bar. Emma asked him questions, too many, I thought, about the schedule for salsa nights and whether couples massages could be booked short notice. I didn't miss the way she laughed at one of his jokes, a soft, breathy sound I hadn't heard from her in years. Our villa was breathtaking. Polished concrete floors, a sunken tub, a king bed with flowing white mosquito netting, and sliding glass doors that opened directly to the beach. There were flower petals on the bed, a bottle of champagne chilling in a silver bucket. Miguel gestured toward the room, still smiling. "If there's anything you need," he said, his eyes flicking toward Emma again, "please don't hesitate." She thanked him. I nodded and tipped him. Then he left. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. Emma had fallen asleep quickly, the champagne doing its work. I lay beside her, watching the ceiling fan rotate with rhythmic indifference. I told myself the weird feeling would fade, that I was just tired, sensitive, that the way her hand had lingered on Miguel's shoulder for a second too long when we thanked him wasn't anything. But even then, deep in my bones, I felt something was coming. Something ugly. Something irreversible. The second night, things changed. Emma seemed lighter, freer. She insisted we explore the resort, have drinks by the pool, try the ceviche from the beachside shack, and go dancing at the little open-air bar near the cliffs. And for the first time in months, we laughed. Really laughed. I watched her sip a mojito under the purple hues of the sunset and thought maybe the worst was just in my head. Maybe we were actually healing. But when she got up to use the bathroom, her phone lit up. A message preview hovered on the screen. "Miguel, I'm off at 10. Same place?" I stared at it. No password. No lock screen. She came back before I could tap it open. I pretended not to have seen it, my body stiff as she leaned in to kiss my cheek, her lips tasting faintly of mint and lime. We went back to the villa, and I couldn't say anything. I needed to be sure. A message could be anything, I told myself. The next day, I made an excuse. Said I'd booked a fishing trip. Left early. I didn't go fishing. I stayed on the resort. Kept out of sight. Watched the pool, the spa entrance, the lobby. Nothing. Around 9:45 p.m., I saw her leave the villa. Alone. Hair tied up in a loose bun. A white wrap around her waist. She didn't look back. I followed her. From a distance, through the palm-strewn walkway behind the spa, there was a small maintenance hut at the edge of the resort, hidden from the main paths, nestled in the trees. I wouldn't have thought twice about it if I hadn't seen the light flick on inside just as Emma approached. She knocked once. The door opened. Miguel. He looked around quickly, then pulled her in. The door closed behind them. I stood there for minutes, maybe hours. I don't remember. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped my heart out and left the echo behind. I didn't go back to the villa. I slept on a lounger near the beach, the ocean wind licking my skin like salt on an open wound. And when I woke up, I knew I couldn't confront her yet. Not until I understood everything. Not until I figured out who the hell Miguel really was, and how long this had been going on. I didn't speak to Emma the next morning. She returned to the villa around midnight, quiet, hair damp, and skin glowing as though she'd just stepped out of a spa treatment. I pretended to be asleep, listening to her move silently around the room, her feet brushing against the tiles, the rustle of fabric as she undressed and climbed into bed. Her breathing was calm, peaceful. She fell asleep quickly. Mine was jagged, shallow, scraping the inside of my lungs like I was inhaling salt water. I lay still, every part of me coiled tight with a quiet rage I didn't know how to name. In the morning, she was cheerful, giggly even, said she'd had strange dreams, and asked if I wanted to do a couple's kayak tour. It might be fun, she said, tying her hair back and slipping on her sunglasses. You and me, just water and sky. I agreed. What else could I do? Scream at her? Demand answers with no evidence, but a glance at her phone and a memory of a door closing? No, that wasn't how this would end. I needed proof, something real, solid. I needed the truth to hit her like it hit me. Unavoidable. Merciless. The kayak tour was surreal. We paddled together in a bright blue bay. The guide pointed out sea turtles and coral fans beneath us. Emma smiled, posed for pictures, and reached for my hand more times than she had in the past year combined. I squeezed back, fingers loose around hers. Not loving, not angry, just watching. At one point, while drifting near a mangrove cove, she leaned in close. You seem quiet today. Just soaking it in, I said, giving her a tight-lipped smile. She stared at me, studying, trying to read what was behind my eyes. I gave her nothing. Let her sit in her illusion. That evening, I returned to the scene. The maintenance hut. It wasn't labeled as anything official. No cameras. No staff. Just a shed with slatted windows and a small porch that hadn't been swept in weeks. I checked it after sundown. Empty. Inside, I found a cheap, worn love seat. A portable fan buzzed faintly in the corner, and there was a small shelf with snacks, water bottles, a few candles. There was also a folded massage table pushed against the wall. A pile of resort towels. A faint smell lingered, lavender and sweat. I spotted a black notebook under the shelf, tucked between two stacked crates. Inside were notes, schedules, names of women, room numbers, small XS marked beside some of the entries. Miguel's handwriting, I assumed, neat, slanted, deliberate. Some had hearts next to the names. A few had check marks, others had symbols I didn't recognize. None of it made immediate sense, until I flipped back 2 pages. Mrs. Talbot, 3 p.m. Tuesday, Villa 14, discreet. A heart, a star, an X. My stomach turned. I took the notebook, shoved it under my shirt, and walked out. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but it felt like holding a loaded gun, the kind of thing that explodes when you need it most. The next morning, I went to the front desk. Hi, I'm looking for Miguel, the gentleman who checked us in. I asked casually. The woman behind the counter looked confused. Miguel? Yes, he wore a white shirt, navy slacks, tall, dark hair. I'm sorry, sir, she said, glancing at her computer. There's no one on staff by that name. I blinked. What? She turned the screen toward me. A list of employees. No Miguel. No one who matched the description. He's probably a subcontractor, she offered. We occasionally have outside vendors or event hosts on the property. Some guests confuse them with staff. I nodded, dazed. Could you tell me if he's scheduled for anything today? I'm sorry, sir, she said again, a bit firmer. If he's not on our system, I can't look him up. I walked out into the sunlight and nearly doubled over. Who the hell was this man? Not staff. Not on any schedule. And yet he had access to rooms, villas, secluded areas, and apparently, to my wife. That night, I followed her again. Same time, same path. I didn't bother hiding. She never looked back. This time, I waited until the door closed, then crept around to the side of the hut. One of the slatted windows was open an inch. Through it, I could see them, silhouettes cast in the amber light of a desk lamp. She stood near the massage table, facing him. He touched her hair. She tilted her head. Then, silence. And movement. I snapped a photo. Blurry. Dark. But clear enough. Two figures, close. Too close. I backed away. I didn't cry. Didn't scream. I walked to the front desk again, this time with the notebook. Is your manager available? I asked, steady as steel. He was. A tall, balding man named Raphael who wore a blazer despite the heat. I handed him the notebook. He flipped through it. His expression hardened. Where did you get this? He asked. In a shed behind the spa. Miguel's shed. I don't know a Miguel, he said, voice clipped. But I know this place. We shut it down a year ago. It was being used by one of the old maintenance staff, for purposes we weren't comfortable with. He's still here, I said. Still using it. Raphael's face went pale. Security will handle it immediately. I handed him the blurry photo. Tell them to be discreet. My wife is involved. Raphael nodded. No questions. Just a professional promise. The kind men make when they see the edge of something messy and choose not to look too hard. That night, I waited on the beach, barefoot, the sand cooling beneath my feet as the waves hissed in the dark. She returned to the villa around 1 a.m. I was still awake. You okay? She asked, unbothered. Did you go for a walk? I did. She climbed into bed, curled onto her side. You should walk with me tomorrow, I said softly. Sunrise is supposed to be beautiful. I'll think about it, she mumbled, already drifting. I watched her as she slept. Her breathing even, her features softened in the moonlight. She didn't look like a villain. She looked like the woman I'd married. But I knew. I knew too much now. And tomorrow I'd let her know too. Morning came, painted in soft pastels and layered in stillness. The ocean breathed quietly just beyond the glass doors, and the light slipping into the room made everything look innocent again, like betrayal had no place in paradise. Emma was still asleep, her face pressed gently into the pillow, strands of hair stuck to her cheek. I watched her for a while, searching for guilt, for some trace of recognition in the lines of her resting expression. But she just looked at peace. I slipped outside with my coffee. The sand was cool under my feet. A couple of early risers jogged past, their bodies lean and content. I sat on a wicker lounger, letting the bitter coffee settle in my mouth as my thoughts turned to the plan I had rehearsed all night. The notebook, the photos, the meeting with Raphael. I hadn't confronted Emma yet because I needed more than accusation. I needed to strip the fantasy from her eyes. Not just so she'd confess, but so she'd see what she was trading real love for. By mid-morning, the hut was gone. I passed it on the way to the resort bar and stopped in my tracks. Where it had stood was now an empty square of trampled grass. The fan, the love seat, the shelf, all gone. No sign it had ever existed. They had moved fast. I found Raphael near the infinity pool, standing beside two security guards in navy polos. He saw me and gave a subtle nod. Handled, he said simply. What about him? I asked. He's been escorted off the property. Permanently. We've notified authorities. No incident. And Emma? I asked. He paused. That's up to you. I walked away, my stomach twisting like a knot of wires. I returned to the villa just after lunch. Emma was reading by the window, legs curled under her, a half-empty mimosa sweating on the side table. She looked up when I entered, her face a careful smile. Hey, you disappeared this morning. I went for that walk, I replied, setting down a brown envelope on the table between us. She looked at it, then at me. What's that? I didn't speak, just sat across from her and stared until she opened it. First, the photo, blurred but unmistakable. Her body, curved in the light, his face close to hers. The outline of his hand on her hip. Then, the copy of the notebook page with her name on it. The heart. The X. Her hands trembled. She looked up, her face drained of color, mouth opening as if to speak, but no words came. You were going to keep pretending, I said quietly. Weren't you? Emma blinked. You were going to keep smiling, sleeping in our bed, holding my hand. All while sneaking away to that shack with a man who doesn't even exist in the system. Her voice cracked, soft and broken. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. I stood, every muscle in my body rigid, vibrating with something I could no longer contain. So how was it supposed to happen, Emma? Tell me. She lowered her head. I don't know. I felt invisible, like I was fading in our life. I laughed bitterly. So you let a stranger make you feel seen? He listened. He made me feel alive again, she whispered. And you were always working, always tired, always somewhere else. I didn't know how to reach you anymore. I sank onto the couch opposite her, elbows on my knees. So you reached for him instead. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't move. I didn't comfort her. I wanted to, some part of me still tethered to the woman I had married. But that part was dying. He's gone, I said flatly. What? She whispered. Security escorted him off the property this morning. The hut is gone. They cleared it out. Her breath caught. You told them? I showed them what I found. I told them what he was doing. You're not the first, Emma. Just the latest. He's been using that place for months. Her face crumpled. I didn't know. I thought. You thought it was just you. That he wanted you. Silence stretched between us. She finally looked at me, eyes swollen with regret. What now? I don't know, I said. But I'm not going back to that room with you tonight. Emma reached for my hand. I pulled it away. I need time. I need to understand what part of me allowed this to happen. Not just you, but everything leading up to this. The erosion. The silence. She didn't argue. She just nodded, tears falling quietly. That night, I booked a second room in another part of the resort, far from the beach. No view. Just 4 beige walls and the hum of the ceiling fan to keep me company. I lay in that unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past week. The laughter, the dancing, the pretending. And I realized something. I had been complicit in the slow decay of our marriage. But she had set fire to the wreckage. At dawn, I walked the beach again. The sky was steel gray, storm clouds gathering at the horizon. The tide was higher, crashing against the shore with restless urgency. I spotted her in the distance, barefoot, hugging herself against the wind. She stood at the water's edge, staring out at the sea. I didn't approach. I just watched. Because tomorrow, we would leave this place. But nothing of us would be the same. The last morning in Tulum arrived with a hush, as if the entire resort had agreed to hold its breath. The sky was a uniform gray, soft light filtering through layers of cloud that dulled the usual Caribbean sparkle. The breeze had turned cool, the waves less playful, more persistent, the kind of weather that doesn't encourage lingering goodbyes. We hadn't spoken since that silent encounter on the beach. Emma stayed in the villa. I remained in my room across the property, waking early, packing slowly. I stood for a long time by the window, watching the shadows of palm fronds tremble against the concrete floor. My heart felt oddly calm, not healed, not whole, but calm in the way a flatline is calm. I think that's what happens when grief finishes its shouting and settles into a whisper. At checkout, we saw each other in the lobby. She looked different, not just tired, but changed in the way someone does after witnessing a fire that consumed something sacred. Her hair was pulled back, no makeup, a loose sweater over her tank top despite the heat. Her suitcase sat beside her chair, the handle upright like a raised white flag. She stood when she saw me, uncertain, searching my face for an invitation that wasn't coming. I nodded toward the shuttle. We should go. They'll be boarding. She followed silently. The airport ride was quiet. I sat by the window. She sat one row behind me, across the aisle. There were no words left to spill between us, only glances, hers, tentative, mine, unreadable. I watched the palm trees grow smaller in the side mirror, swallowed by distance. On the plane, she asked to sit next to me. I said nothing but didn't protest. At 30,000 feet, above the clouds, she finally spoke. Do you hate me? I turned my head slightly, watching the edge of the wing through the porthole window. No, I said after a long silence. I don't hate you. I wish I did. It'd be easier. Her voice trembled. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not sure forgiveness is even the point anymore. We didn't speak for the rest of the flight. When we got home, everything looked untouched. The house was still clean, the plants alive, the dishes done. But it felt wrong, like walking into a theater after the actors have left, their costumes still hanging backstage. She walked upstairs, dragging her suitcase. I stayed downstairs, standing in the foyer as the silence wrapped around me. That night, she slept in the guest room, and I didn't sleep at all. The following weeks passed in blurred monotony. We shared space, not lives. Like divorced roommates still tethered by logistics and inertia. We had a mortgage, a joint bank account, mutual friends who didn't know what had happened, not yet. She tried to speak sometimes, to explain, to cry. I let her, but I didn't respond. I had nothing kind to offer and nothing cruel left to throw. One evening, I found the resort notebook on my desk. She must have placed it there without a word. Inside, she'd left a letter. I was wrong. Not just in what I did, but in what I allowed myself to become. Someone who went silent and small rather than reach for you. I confused being bored with being unloved. I confused lust with meaning. But you were always there, solid, steady, and I mistook your consistency for absence. I'm sorry for what I broke. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. 2 weeks later, I gave her the papers. No lawyers, just a mediator. We were too tired for war. The betrayal had already burned the village to the ground. There was no point in fighting over ashes. She cried when she signed. I didn't. A year passed. I moved into a smaller place, closer to the ocean. Not to chase memories of that trip, but to reclaim something of myself in the waves. Something raw, unpredictable, and real. Some nights I'd walk the shoreline, letting the surf nip at my ankles, the salt sting my skin. I'd think of her sometimes. Not always with anger. Sometimes with sadness. Occasionally with gratitude. Because in the end, her betrayal wasn't just the ending. It was the mirror, the unraveling, the storm that stripped everything false and left me staring at the bones of who I was and who I had let myself become. I didn't miss her the way I thought I would. I missed the idea of us. The way we once laughed over wine. The feel of her hand in mine on late-night drives. The dreams we made before the world bruised them. But I also knew this. The version of me that had walked into that resort was gone. And what rose from the ruin was someone quieter, wiser, stronger. So when I stood on the sand one morning and watched the sunrise alone, real, vibrant, untouchable, I didn't feel empty. I felt ready. Not for her, not for someone else, but for myself. At last,